I'm talking about events that are going to be in history books in the same way as the collapse of the Soviet Union or 1929 stock market crash or the collapse of the Weimar Republic in 1922 are, like massive scale events. And I believe that one of the first dominoes to fall is going to be Great Britain. And this is something that not only is going to be gaining a lot of attention, but it also offers investors a very significant opportunity to navigate these events profitably and to generate very strong windfall profits from them. There's going to, possibly Japan is going to be in the same boat, and the European Union. In the end, probably the United States as well. But
Hi guys, you're watching Capital Cosm. My name is Danny, and today's guest is Alex Krainer, geopolitical analyst and third-time guest on the show. Alex, thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me, Danny. Good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for making the hat trick. So let's just dive right in, Alex. Let's just take it from the top. I want to hone in on whatever it is on your mind right now. What is occupying your headspace? And then we can kind of touch on points as we move along here. So what's front and center for you? What's top of the radar screen for you right now?
Maybe the U.S. elections, because let's say that if we were going to expect fair elections, it wouldn't be so controversial. I think that pretty much everybody and their pets would expect Donald Trump to win, but I also think that the very fact that the DNC selected Kamala Harris as their candidate is pretty clear indication that they intend to cheat, that they don't intend to lose this election. What they can do, whether they have any, well, let's see, we still have 2 days of October, whether there's going to be some kind of a really nasty October surprise or something happening between now and November 5th remains to be seen. And I think that a lot rides on them. I think that the U.S. role in the world depends on this, whether the United States is going to continue acting as a global policeman, or whether they're going to give up on that role and become one of the peer nations in multipolar integrations and become world's trader, exporter, importer, partner to other nations. So much rides on that. So again, if it were just a matter of fair, transparent elections, it wouldn't even be the question. But something might happen. And then, apparently the polls suggest that about a quarter of the American public expects there to be a civil war, that there will be violence after the elections. So I think that would be the issue that's front and center for me, in spite of everything else going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's eerily strange, however. Being here in America, there doesn't seem to be any big sense of urgency to stop Trump, or even on the other side, like there does not appear to be like any sense of urgency to really destroy the other side, as it may seem. The temperature nowadays is a lot cooler than it was in 2020 and in 2016. So I don't know where the direction is, but where do you see what are some of the ramifications of a Trump second term versus a Harris first term in this case?
Oh, you mean Obama's fourth term?
Yeah, whatever fits your fancy.
Well, the continuation of the DNC cabinet administration, whether it's fourth Obama term or first Harris term, I think is continuing down the path of global destabilization. slide into, let's say, deeper authoritarianism, uh, slant towards communism, towards a communist system of governance, um, and continuation of forever wars and expansion of forever wars. Because let's not forget, in spite of the engagements in Ukraine and the Middle East, the current lineup is gung ho on starting a war against China, so adding yet another front to the forever wars. On the other hand, in spite of Trump being kind of a weird candidate, because he has a large following, obviously, people who treat him like a rock star, who are very enthused by the idea of Trump ascending to the White House again. Even if you're not a Trump enthusiast, I think that you have to recognize that he didn't start any new wars. That American diplomacy looked a lot more like diplomacy under Trump than it does now, and that he did engage with global leaders like Xi Jinping, like Vladimir Putin, like Kim Jong Un in North Korea, and talking to other world leaders is a lot better than fighting wars. So even for people who are not Trump enthusiasts, they have to recognize that his way of politics was um, much much more favorable to peaceful resolution to global conflicts than to expansion of forever wars. So I think that for that reason, probably most of the world today hopes for a genuine change in U.S. politics, and I think that change can only begin with the Trump administration, and it will definitely not begin with another 4 years of Democrats in the White House.
Trump definitely seems dovish on the Ukraine war, but there is some shaky ground when it comes to the Iran conflict. There, he has mentioned that we should stop Iran from making a bomb. Even his vice president, first JD Vance, his vice presidential pick, one of his first comments was to strike Iran. How do you view or reconcile Trump's hawkishness when it comes to Iran as part of this anti-war platform that he's trying to cultivate?
Well, you're right that JD Vance sounded very hawkish on Iran. I also watched parts of Donald Trump's interview with Patrick Bet-David,
Mm-hmm.
and there Trump sounded a lot more conciliatory. I think there's two angles to it. One of them is the election talk, right? So uh, Trump obviously needs the support of his Jewish donors, and a lot of his Jewish donors are pro-Israel crowd, and so he has to give them signals that he is on their side, and uh, their wet dream is the destruction of Iran as an adversary to Israel. And second, I think in typical Trump fashion, he ratchets up the tensions before he talks to people. If you'll remember, he did the same with
Mm-hmm.
North Korea. There was a period of escalating rhetoric between North Korea and the United States, particularly Trump with his tweets and statements about, him having bigger bombs and bigger rockets and stuff like that. And then, came the conciliatory gestures. And I guess that ratcheting up tensions is to put yourself in a favorable position in negotiating, to say like, well, okay, we don't really have to destroy you and bomb you into Stone Age, but you're going to have to do this and this for us. So I think that from his point of view, this could be part of that game. Um, there was a period of time in 2019 when heavy pressure was exerted on Donald Trump to launch an attack against Iran, to go directly against Iran. And this was, if you'll recall, in the aftermath of the Iranians downing one of those spy drones in the Persian Gulf, which apparently strayed into Iranian territorial airspace, and then the Iranians shot it down. And then Anonymous leaked out a series of cables that were exchanged between the British Embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London. And what became clear from those exchanges of cables is that it was the British Embassy that was leading the charge to pressure Trump administration into launching a war against Iran. And when Trump declined, then the ambassador to British ambassador to the United States, his name is Sir Kim Darroch. He fired off a series of very undiplomatic cables to London, and the scandal that emerged from those cables was such that Sir Kim Darroch had to be recalled, and the British had to change the ambassador to Washington, D.C. So, Trump was in power. Pressure to start war against Iran was exerted of him. The pretext was created, and he declined. And obviously, the pressure didn't come from the United States, it came from London. And, we see London exerting interference in US elections because, they will probably get all those wars much easier through Harris administration than from Trump. But on the basis of the fact that he declined to start another war, even when the whole situation was created for him and he was under heavy pressure to do so, and he didn't, kind of, gives me faith that he is more inclined to open a diplomatic chapter with the Iranians, to talk to them, to try to create friendly and constructive relationship with Iranians, rather than to start another war on behalf of Israel or the city of London.
What do you think? What do you think his presidency means for the Israel-Gaza war, as well as Lebanon?
It's very hard for me to judge because all he could do diplomatically at this point is push for a two-state solution. I don't think that he can move the Israelis from their current agenda, because it's all tangled in Israeli internal politics. And so the Netanyahu government and his wingmen, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they will never allow a two-state solution. So they will never even consider a ceasefire. They don't even, Netanyahu, now we know, has been sabotaging all efforts through diplomacy to return Israeli hostages home. So for them, it's one-track mind, full-on war against Lebanon, against Palestinians in Gaza, expulsion of all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and from the West Bank, and creation of a one-state, ethnically pure state of Israel with no Palestinians in it. It's gone quite. How do you call it? It's gone quite eschatological in that sense. I don't see how Trump could change anything there, even if he has a, let's call it, a friendly relation with Benjamin Netanyahu, in the sense that he can call him and talk to him. I think that for the reasons of internal politics in Israel, Netanyahu will simply continue on the same track that he's on now. And I think that, the reality is that even if Trump pushed for a two-state solution, there's not going to be a two-state solution. There's going to be a one-state solution now, and it's a question of whether it's going to be a Jewish state or if it's going to be Palestine as it was before 1948. Uh, I think that time is running out for Israel. I think that they have burnt all the bridges to any reasonable, friendly solution, to any reconciliation with their neighbors. And for them, the resort to violence and military means has remained the only solution. The problem with that is that Israel itself cannot prevail in that situation, and they were, you know, they are heavily reliant on the United States. However, the United States in the 1990s and the United States today are two different military powers. One was very strong and could deter any challenge to its hegemony. Today's United States is no longer in the same position. One of the things that may have escaped uh, attention is that, for example, the Ansar Allah in Yemen has demonstrated that they are capable of striking targets in Israel and in the Red Sea and in the Eastern Mediterranean with pinpoint accuracy, and that they can sink ships in the Red Sea. And so, if they can sink, commercial vessels and tankers in the Red Sea, they can also sink military vessels. And so, Israel, which is heavily reliant on U.S. military power and is kind of escalating their wars with the view of getting the United States involved, it seems that they haven't taken into account that the United States cannot come to their aid as they might have done 30 years ago. And this is why the United States now has to keep their navy outside of the range of Ansar Allah rockets. And so I think that they have really come to the end of the road. They've painted themselves into a corner. And I think that the Jewish state will slowly wither and die because its state institutions are failing. It's practically a failed state at home. They can no longer provide any service to their citizens, and the citizens of Israel, all who can, are slowly packing their stuff and going back to the United States, to Western Europe, to Russia, or wherever else they came from. And so I think that over time, there's going to be a moment where a critical mass of Jewish citizens are going to be leaving Israel permanently. And I think that's pretty much going to be game over, and that an opportunity will be created to set up a one state, but it's probably going to be some sort of a democratic state of Jews, Muslims, and Christians, in which hopefully all people will be treated as equal citizens of a new state of Palestine. And I don't see what Trump can change about that.
Right. So let's go ahead and segue over to something that's happened over the weekend, which was the Israel retaliation to Iran. It appears there were four Iranian soldier deaths, although they haven't really provided any details on who these four soldiers were. Were they IRGC members? Were they located in Syria or somewhere else where the attack took place? But be that as it may, it appears as if the oil market's pricing in no further escalations down the road. Although the Iranians did say that they would retaliate to the retaliation, where did this start? We can go on a big argument about that, but the oil market doesn't appear to price in any further escalation. What do you make of it? Do you see this kind of tit for tat ending as of this past weekend, or is Iran going to make true to their word and retaliate?
It seems to me that the oil market interpreted Israeli action as a flop. Uh, that's one interpretation, that Israeli attack on Iran was a flop, that it was very ineffective, and that Iranian air defense systems have neutralized the bulk of the attack. Now, if four soldiers died, and you're right, we don't know which soldiers and where. Then some missiles came through, something got blown up. There have been a number of satellite images floating around the social media showing that this and that had been blown up. Some nuclear site, apparently disused nuclear site, and some missile booster rockets production factories have been damaged or destroyed. But it's not clear whether these images are genuine, when they were taken, and so a different interpretation of these attacks could be also that Israel started by perhaps cutting into Iranian air defense systems uh, to create, to destroy their air defense radars and to lay the ground for subsequent attack or series of attacks. Uh, in which case, we're gonna see these tensions escalate. As things stand now, uh, Iran could be in a position to declare victory and to not escalate any further and to not launch any retaliatory attack against Israel. And I think that that's the interpretation that the oil markets have settled upon. But we don't know that yet. I think it's too early, and I think that over the coming days, we might see uh, repeats of Israeli attacks, selecting different targets. It remains to be seen. And in that case, then Iran will have to respond and respond strongly. And then the oil markets are going to be proven wrong, which wouldn't be the first time. Markets are not actually very good at predicting geopolitical or political events. They're among the last to realize that there's a world war going on, and so the fact that the oil price went down by 5.5% this morning doesn't mean that the oil market is right about what's going on.
Right. And when it comes to geopolitical events, we had a massive one occur last week by way of this BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia. And Putin opened up by saying that he did not want to go to war with the dollar, but the West forced him to look into a new settlement currency, an alternative settlement currency. It's not that they wanted to create one out of volition, just that they had no other choice. What do you make of that summit last week?
Well, the summit appeared to be a big success. There were some 30 heads of state there, 20,000 delegates. Putin himself had 17 bilateral meetings on the outskirts of the summit. Um, Pretty much everybody who's anybody was there, and even the Saudis, who are obviously under tremendous pressure to, you know, scale back their involvement. They send their foreign minister. So it seems to me that the whole world is turning towards these multipolar integrations, and more governments are trying to become new members of the BRICS. And BRICS added 13 new nations as BRICS partner nations, which is the step before becoming a full member of the organization. Now, with regards to the alternative currencies, I'm not sure how to interpret that, because there's a lot of contrary messaging going on. Um, they were a few years ago they were talking about establishing a new trade reserve currency and trade settlement currency, and then the people who were actually in charge of exploring this possibility, like Sergei Glaziev, they said, like, well, no, that's very complicated. It will be just as easy and just as effective if countries simply use their own national currencies to settle their trade balances. And now we have Putin's statements from Kazan, where he said that uh, launching an alternative to the dollar was not even being discussed on the summit. Yet they produced a BRICS banknote, an actual physical banknote representing a BRICS currency. And we saw in one photograph Putin actually showing this
Hmm.
banknote. Well, it looks like legit money. And so that means that somebody went through a lot of trouble to produce those banknotes. You know, they don't just print themselves. Somebody has to make that happen. Was this a bluff? Was this a public relations stunt? Was this something that will be launched as a surprise to the G7 world? I can't really say, but it's very clear that the global South, led by China, Russia, India, Iran, are very actively looking for ways and means to circumvent the US dollar for very obvious reason, because we have seen that the Western powers have weaponized their currencies and their financial systems, and that they use them to exert political pressure on different current on different national governments. So it's very logical that they're trying to circumvent them, because it would very plainly improve the terms of trade that they get in you know conducting import and export transactions with other governments. But where exactly the state of those development is very, very hard to judge. And I think that I can think of a few reasons why um, they would want to launch this as a surprise, that they would want to um, not exactly pre-announce this and allow the Western powers to sabotage the launch, to try to prevent it, you know uh, to scuttle it in whatever way they could.
And will gold play a factor in all of this? I mean, there have been leaked memos that gold will be about a 40% backing of the currency. There doesn't appear to be anything official, but what role could a gold or commodity basket play in this currency, and what would that mean for the United States, the dollar, etc.?
It seems that gold will be represent 40% of the backing of the new currency, and that everything else will be denominated in gold. That is, the value of other types of assets will be expressed in terms of gold.
Mm.
And the reason why I think this is because I read the white paper for the so-called the unit, which was
Mm-hmm.
circulated a few weeks ago, and I at first I thought it was a gimmick. I thought it was some kind of a new crypto thing. But once I read through the white paper, I saw that it was a very, very well put together document, that people who put it together were very learned people, that they knew exactly what they were talking about, that the objective was to create a completely new financial architecture for the world. And based on that paper, it's clear that gold is going to be extremely important. 40% of the backing of the currency, and then the unit of account in which the value of all other assets are going to be expressed.
Right. And so let's just go ahead and pivot over to gold. Gold's been making all-time highs. I said to my guest Tom Luongo the other day, it's what at a 30, it's made 35 all-time highs in the span of a year so far. Silver's hasn't made an all-time high, but it's made 12-year highs. Nonetheless, it hit that $35 handle, but then as soon as has since retreated back down below the $34 level. What are your takeaways on the gold and silver market right now? Can gold keep climbing higher? It does appear to be driven mainly by central bank buying, not institutions, not retail, but government buying.
Yeah, I think it could go a lot higher. I think that now some of those mainstream analysts are boldly predicting $3,000 an ounce, and usually they always predict $3,000 once gold gets to 29.95, But I think it can go a lot higher. And the reason why I say this is because we are, like we're in a different period in global markets. We have something like $200 trillion sloshing around in the shadow banking system. And so the shadow banking system for your viewers is the it's the hedge funds, the pension funds, the endowments. It's all the quasi-banking institutions that have a large amount of investable liquid assets, but they're not banks in the sense that they cannot create credit, right? So they just have liquid assets at their disposal, but they can't create credit like banks can. Okay, so there's a total of about $200 trillion in that system. And generally, if just a small mm, segment of the people managing all that wealth decides that they want to increase their exposure to gold, that's a massive upward pressure on the price of gold. That could potentially happen. And then I think that part of the reason why gold has been depressed for such a long time is because, culturally it's been relegated to obscurity. We've been kind of brainwashed in the market for several decades that gold is a barbarous relic, that it doesn't matter, that it's irrelevant, that nobody needs it, nobody wants it, nobody cares. And I think that one of the most memorable manifestations of the cultural brainwash was when a few years ago Mark Dice polled passersby in California, and he was offering them a 1 ounce gold coin in exchange for their, used water bottles and baseball hats and notebooks and pens and whatever they had on them. And I think that he interviewed something close to 20 people, and not a single one was interested in exchanging whatever they had for the 1 ounce gold coin. And they were standing right next to a gold dealership where he said, like, here, you can go just right here and verify the value of this coin. And they were like, no, 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 thank you, goodbye. And that reminded me a little bit of Bitcoin, because the company where I was working, we launched a big Bitcoin fund in 2013. And at the time, Bitcoin was trading at around, let's call it $400, right? And everybody in the industry was saying, what the hell are you guys doing? You're going to damage your reputation. What is this thing, Bitcoin? That's nonsense. And nobody was interested in the fund. Nobody. And then at some point in 2018 or 2019, Bitcoin had one of those hockey stick rallies, and it went from $500 to $19,000. Well, at that point, everybody was interested, and the phones were ringing off the hook. Everybody wanted to get into the Bitcoin fund. And the point is that you might have a valuable asset there that you could invest in, and nobody's interested because nobody's interested. And then once everybody's falling over themselves to get into the action because they're afraid of missing out, then they don't care whether the thing costs $500 or whether it costs $19,000. And so we've just seen gold rally decisively towards new all-time historical highs. And this is only the start of people paying attention. And I think that once enough people start noticing, like once the proverbial shoeshine boys start talking about gold, you could see gold go to, maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000, maybe 20,000. Nobody may know. But let's remember that in 1970s, when we had the last strong inflationary period, that the prices of gold appreciated over a period of 10 years from $35 an ounce to $800 an ounce. So gold went up not by 50%, not by 100%, it went up 24-fold. So we may be in the first innings of that kind of a development. And same for silver. Silver went up, I think, 50-fold in the 1970s. And silver has been even more depressed than gold. And even today, silver chart doesn't look like very much. But, I think it's gathering momentum, and I think that there's going to be further breakouts. And I think that once you see silver trading at $50, then the shoeshine boys are going to be talking about silver. And then you're going to see some real action.
Hey guys, quick pause. As you know, we are big proponents of physical gold and silver on this channel. However, the conundrum often arises, where do you put it? Do you put it in an above ground safe where it becomes a target for burglars, intruders, etc.? Or do you bury it underground? This is where Dirty Man's Safe comes in. This is a very simplified solution if you want to bury your gold or silver, or actually any valuables underground, whether it be alternative car keys, house keys, paperwork, legal documents, anything that's important to you. You can put in this bad boy right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it works. All right, so you're going to start off by digging a hole underground, sticking the tubular module in with the safe inside. You bury your valuables, and then whenever you want to extract it, boom, there it is. There's a string attachment. You just pull it out. Bada bing, bada boom. Check it out here. You have 3 different sizes: the girl safe, the man safe, and the old man safe, depending on how much you want to store in this thing. It's all about distribution. You want to diversify where you put your valuables. You don't want to just put them all in one place. And for more information, also click the link down below and get your 15% off discount. All right, guys, let's get back to the video. What's it going to take for institutions to get into gold and silver, though? Because they haven't really put in much of a position either.
Um, I don't know. Institutions generally have their prospectuses. They're generally limited in how much they can allocate to any one asset or asset class. And so not much is going to happen. But what the thing that's going to change the dynamic is that you're going to see a lot of institution making those small allocation changes at the same time. And then you're going to get a big effect all the same. When that's going to happen, I can't say, but we might not be far from that, because as you said, gold has put in a whole string of new all-time highs. And probably as we speak now, there are people in institutions there saying like, hey, we need to increase our allocation to gold. And so many of them are going to be doing it, and then we're going to see the impact on the price.
Interesting. And what about the rest of the commodity complex there? We did mention that oil has been taking quite a hit because it appears to be de-risking on part of the Iran Israel conflict there. How do you see the oil trade playing out? And also, doesn't a lower oil price, isn't that a bullish indicator for some of these mining producers? Because you essentially bring down their input costs.
Now you're asking me to talk about fundamentals, and I don't know how to talk about fundamentals because I can't make heads or tails of it. And it's not just because I can't, but nobody else can either. I mean, I've spent 26 years on the market reading fundamentals reports, and they have about 50-50 track record of being right or wrong. Generally, it's always the prices that lead the narrative rather than the narrative leading the price. What I mean by that is that you could interpret fundamentals in a bearish way, or you can interpret them in a bullish way. And there's always an abundance of elements that can support a bearish story and a bullish story at any moment in time, always. And then usually it's the price that legitimizes one interpretation over the other. So if the price is going up, then all of those analysts that were predicting the price rise are going to be the geniuses of the moment who are going to be on CNBC and Bloomberg TV and elsewhere, who are going to be explaining why they knew that the price was going to go up. If the price collapses, then they're going to bring out all the geniuses that predicted the price was going to collapse, and they're going to be explaining why they knew that the price was going to collapse. Whether the fundamentals play a role, I'm not exactly sure, and I wouldn't know how if they did. But I think that we are in the commodity super cycle, and I think that the commodity prices are generally going to be steadily rising higher. today we're seeing that with gold and silver. To a lesser extent, we're seeing it in palladium. We saw earlier this year a general upswing in commodity prices almost across the board. And then we saw a retreat as well. A lot of this has to do with also with Fed policy, because every time you drain liquidity from the system, it has a very strong impact on commodity prices. But when you push liquidity into the markets, then it has a bullish impact on commodity prices. And now we see that the Fed has to be increasing liquidity because the whole banking system is going to seize up otherwise. And I think that this might be the decisive factor in determining commodity prices rather than, you know, whether lower prices are going to help the miners or whether less lower prices at the gas pumps are going to encourage people to do traveling and shopping and, like all of those interpretations. I think it's going to be more the Fed policy and the general geopolitical environment that's going to be shaping prices going forward.
Understood. I think we've covered a whole host of things here, Alex. Anything else you want to talk about before we sign off?
Well, there are many things, but I think that what's important to keep in mind, regardless of the markets, is that we are really truly at a point in history where events that are going to be unfolding are going to be for the history books.
Hmm.
Uh, One of the events that I'm looking at now is the collapse of Great Britain. And I published an article about that at the late August, and I am overdue to publish part two. But I'm talking about events that are going to be in history books in the same way as the collapse of the Soviet Union or 1929 stock market crash or the collapse of the Weimar Republic in 1922 are, like massive scale events. And I believe that one of the first dominoes to fall is going to be Great Britain. And this is something that not only is going to be gaining a lot of attention, but it also offers investors a very significant opportunity to navigate these events profitably and to generate very strong windfall profits from them. There's going to, possibly Japan is going to be in the same boat and the European Union. In the end, probably United States as well. But I believe that the Great Britain will be the first domino to fall, and the markets also seem to think so because I looked at how the British bonds performed, British government bonds performed relative to German government bonds and United States government bonds. And let's say that since the beginning of 2021, British government bonds performed the worst. They're down about 30%, whereas German situation is also quite dismal, but they went down only about 22, 23%, and the US bonds only 20%. So the markets are judging Great Britain as the weak link. And I think that today we are 28 October. 2 days from now, Keir Starmer is going to be announcing the new budget. That might prove to be some kind of an inflection point, but generally, my prediction has been that we're going to see a gradual unraveling of the British pound. I think that we're going to see a collapse of British government bonds. And very probably we're going to have a continued bullish rally in the FTSE in British stocks. And so, that's a large macro play, but I think that the outcomes, the trajectory might be bumpy, but the outcome is next to certain. It's almost a mathematical certainty how this is going to play out. Anyhow, I'm due to publish an article about this over the coming few days on my Substack. And so that's another very, very interesting situation to watch. And then that same scenario is probably going to play out in a similar way in Japan, in the EU, um, and in the end, probably in the United States as well.
What's it look on the other side of the tunnel, though? Well, I mean, yes, the outcome is Britain collapses, but what happens after? How does that look like? Does Great Britain balkanize? What's the end game here?
I think it'll depend on political fallouts. Uh, you know, in every one of those, if, in every one of those unraveling situations throughout history, we saw also political changes. Well, okay, maybe Cuba would be an exception there because the Cuban Communist Party stayed intact throughout. But in Russia, for example, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, we had a political change, and Vladimir Putin came to power. So it'll be interesting to see if there's going to be a political change in Great Britain because the UK is going to find itself not only in a deep economic crisis, it's also going to find itself in a deep political crisis. Well, the British, they have centuries old what they call a constitutional monarchy, except there is no constitution to that monarchy. The whole thing is fake. And are people going to be ready to do away with the monarchy? Are they going to demand an actual, real democracy, or is some kind of a political strongman going to, some Oliver Cromwell going to emerge out of the ashes? Britain is also going to be under tremendous political pressure from abroad because they've really exposed themselves as the elections meddler in the United States. They've also exposed themselves as the cheerleader for war in Ukraine and one of the key players in the war in Israel, in Palestine. And I think that there's going to be pressure on the United Kingdom to make up uh, for their colonial past. Several years ago, we had a group of Indian academics who calculated how much wealth Britain plundered from out of India during the colonial period, and they came up with a figure of $44 trillion. And somebody else calculated that they also killed about 180 million Indians. That is, that about 180 million Indians died as a consequence of British colonial abuse. I wonder sometimes whether people make those calculations to amuse themselves, or maybe they're going to make a claim at some point and say, um, "You stole a lot of gold from us. Now we want it back." And all of those monuments that you have at the British Museum, we want all that back. So Britain might find itself on the target of sanctions in the way that the Western powers have sanctioned other countries around the world. I don't know. It's very difficult to predict that, but I wonder if there isn't going to be at some point when people realize that the system is collapsing in Britain, that there isn't going to be some kind of a feeding frenzy. Russians have hundreds of investigative files for the theft of Russian assets during the 1990s, and a lot of that ended up in London. So it's going to be very, very difficult for the British establishment, and I think that uh, the logic of the conflict between Russia and the let's call it the transatlantic community, uh, uh, that the logic of the conflict almost dictates that the Russians have to go all the way, meaning that they're going to have to demand uh, opening up of the Western jurisdictions to Russian lawsuits. And so it's going to get very ugly. I think there's going to be a payback for the last 300 years of colonialism.
I see. Well, hey, Alex, it's been a pleasure having you on as always. Drop us where people can find you. What are your socials?
Yeah, so my Substack is Alex Krainer's Trend Compass, and I'm active on X. My handle is @NakedHedgie.
Excellent. We'll have all those links down below, guys. Be sure to check them out. And as always, I'd like to thank you guys for making it all the way towards the end of the video. If you found value out of this interview, remember to give us a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's free and it goes a long way. But if you'd like to take it up a level, check out my Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com, where you'll get exclusive content that you won't find here on the YouTube channel, as well as the opportunity to ask my future guest questions and recommend me guests with a whole host of other features there. So be sure to check it out. And Alex, yeah, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Danny. Take care. Bye.